Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Occupational Therapy for Professional Drivers. My name is Jade Matthews Rosado, and you're likely here because you're interested in MSD prevention for professional drivers. Well, you're definitely in the right place because OT for PD is being developed specifically to help professional drivers fight against the aches and pains that they experience every day as a result of driving. This entire channel is rooted in occupational therapy principles and techniques, hence the name OT for PD. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, before we get into it, let's go ahead and do a recap. I mentioned before that I'm a doctoral student in occupational therapy from the University of St. Augustine for Health Sciences. And this is all what's part of my capstone project. I explain more about that in the intro video if you want to watch it again. And I also explained that occupational therapists, or OTs, are problem solvers. We look at what's keeping you from doing what's important to you, those things that you want to do or the things that you need to do. And we work with you to figure out viable solutions to help you get back to those things that you find meaningful, or what's called your meaningful occupations. We also talked about barriers. Barriers being those things that create problems and can keep you from fully engaging in those things that you find meaningful or your meaningful occupations. The problems that we'll be addressing here on OT for PD are MSDs or musculoskeletal disorders, and they're a huge barrier for professional drivers. Here, we're going to learn some of the basics about MSDs as well as some skills and resources that you can use to help you prevent them. As I mentioned before, and I'll probably say it again, I did say that I'm a student, and what that means is that I can't treat you in any way physically. But my goal is to give you basic resources and skills to help you help yourselves prevent MSDs. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. So let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, so let's talk about the driver experience. Now, I've been a commuter for over 3 years, driving around an hour or more to and from grad school every day. And I've struggled with things like back pain and neck aches and shoulder stiffness and fatigue, and there's just so much more. But that was just from me driving a maximum of 2 to 3 hours a day by myself. Now, my husband, on the other hand, he's a professional driver and he's driven trucks. He's done, medical transportation. He's driven cement trucks. He's gone over the road. All of those for over 12 or more hours every single day. And now he's actually a school bus driver here in Florida. So with him, I was thinking, well, if I'm struggling with so much fatigue and having trouble with so much pain, and I'm just driving myself a couple of hours a day, how much more is he experiencing in his other driving jobs? And even now, while driving a bunch of kids around. And so here's what's interesting. I decided that I would do more research. And what I found out is that professional drivers are specifically susceptible to suffering from the same aches and pains that I was experiencing. And if you're a professional driver watching right now, that's probably nothing new for you. You might actually agree with me. But for me in my OT mind, that really sent off a light bulb because it was like I said before, OTs are problem solvers. And so I wanted to find out more about this problem and what I could actually do to help solve it. Now, if you haven't figured it out by now, all of the aches and pains that I've been mentioning, they all have a name, and they're known as MSDs or musculoskeletal disorders. And this is the primary subject of our time together. Now, before we continue, if you happen to have any questions or concerns, go ahead and leave those in the comments below, or feel free to email me. I'll leave my email at the end of the video. All right, let's keep going. Now, what are MSDs? MSDs, or musculoskeletal disorders, again, these are injuries and disorders that affect the human's body movement or the musculoskeletal system. This system includes things like the muscles, of course, the tendons, your ligaments, the nerves, and other structures in the body. Some of the most common MSDs you've probably heard of or experienced are carpal tunnel syndrome or neck tension, lower back pain, inflamed tendus or tendinitis, muscle strain, things of that nature. As I've mentioned before, professional drivers are specifically at risk for these kinds of problems, which often causes trouble with their jobs. As a matter of fact, the research shows that drivers are susceptible to MSDs because of the very nature of their jobs. So, if you really think about it, while you're driving, as a professional driver at least, you sit for long hours, sometimes in awkward positions. You're doing the same motions 200, 300 times a day, maybe. Other drivers or even your passengers are also getting on your nerves. And all of this is happening while you're trying to focus on the road and drive safely. If you're a driver, I'm not saying that you should go and quit. I just want you to be aware that MSDs might be affecting you much more than you think. Okay, so one of the most prominent contributors to disability in America is musculoskeletal conditions. And they're responsible for almost 30% of all workers' compensation costs, according to the BLS. As a matter of fact, MSDs are the largest category of workplace injuries, also according to the BLS. Because of this, companies and institutions end up spending billions and billions of dollars on MSDs direct costs. The average cost of a single MSD or musculoskeletal disorder is around $15,000. And even though that price is pretty high, the craziest thing is that these costs and the struggles that these companies faced with MSDs is completely unnecessary. And the reason why is because MSDs are preventable. I don't know if you heard me, but MSDs are preventable. You'll hear me say that a lot throughout these videos. None of this would have to happen in terms of cost and the exorbitant weight of finances on these companies if they just realize how preventable MSDs are, and if they realize that there are so many things that can be done to help prevent MSDs. So I'm really hoping that you can let that sink in. Take a few seconds to just absorb it because, again, MSDs are preventable. So we know that MSDs impact drivers even though they are preventable. So what contributes to MSD development? I like to view them under two main categories: environmental factors and personal risk factors. Environmental risk factors include things like cabin restrictions, car fit, or how well a car or vehicle fits you, distractions and noise in the environment, or even road vibrations, going over those lumps and bumps in the road. Now, personal factors involve things like repetitive motion, doing the same thing 100 times a day, bad or awkward posturing, like I sometimes like to do, prolonged sitting for hours and hours on end, and even poor habits and lifestyle or poor rest and recovery. Now, organizational or institutional factors can also be considered here, since drivers have to follow the guidelines of their companies that govern things like the number of hours worked, or routes driven, or even your break times. All of these things can contribute to the slow breakdown and injury of the body, and they create pain and discomfort that can increase daily. This can interfere with your job performance, your work sustainability, and even your safety. And these are all contributors to MSDs, and we don't even think about some of them sometimes. And this is what we're going to be talking about in the next couple of sessions. So, can we fix it? I've been talking about MSDs and how bad they are, but how exactly do we fix the problem? How exactly do we tackle the issue? It's easy to jump on the symptoms, but how do we address the core of the issue? So the literature recommends training. According to my research, that's the key to fixing this problem. It's suggested that professional drivers need proper training to be able to recognize and handle the risk factors surrounding MSDs. I won't bore you with all of the details, but in summary, the research says that driver training should address personal and environmental risk factors, encourage coping and better behaviors from drivers and managers, and ultimately diminish or prevent the occurrence of MSDs. And this is what we'll be striving for in our time together. Now, the purpose of this entire channel is really empowerment. Um, and there are just a few goals that I'm really hoping to have you achieve as you go through this information. The first goal is to understand the effects of MSDs and the role of occupational therapy. Next, we have understanding how your personal behavior and your environment can make MSDs better or worse. Goal 3 is understanding the basic techniques and resources to combat MSDs. And last but not least is demonstrating sufficient understanding and application through knowledge checks and surveys. We'll talk a little bit more about this in our next slide. All right, to determine if we're really meeting those goals, I'm encouraging you to do two things. First, our knowledge checks tells me if you're truly learning and understanding the material we cover in these sessions. At the end of the next video, I'll ask you to complete a quiz game and see what you can remember. Next, the CMDQ assessment shows me that you really understand how to apply the information and that you've made a change. This assessment is pretty self-explanatory, even though it might look a little complicated, but it asks you how much difficulty you've experienced from your aches and pains and how much these troubles might be impacting you in your work life. You can do this twice, once now and then once later, and then you can compare your scores to see how things have changed for you. You can find this assessment in the link below. I'll leave it down there for you. All right, everyone, that's all for today. We just skimmed the surface of our information, but there's so much more to come. Be sure to check out our channel and don't forget to subscribe and hit those notifications so you can know when the next videos are coming out. I'm excited to share more and more information with you about MSD prevention for professional drivers. Oh, also, if you have any questions or concerns, go ahead and send me an email. I left it down below so that you can contact me at any point to ask me those questions, and hopefully I can get back to you as soon as possible with an answer. Thanks so much for being here and tuning in. We'll see you again next time. Bye, guys.